Have you ever come across something that makes you pause and think, wait, what did I just witness? That's exactly what happened when people started to notice the developments surrounding Whitney Houston's legacy, Kendrick Lamar's daughter making strides, and Lil Uzi Vert casually taking dance lessons as if it were completely normal. Before you dismiss this as just celebrity gossip, take a moment to reflect, because what's really unfolding here is far more important than you might realize. This entire scenario exemplifies how culture can shift unexpectedly, how legends are celebrated in surprising ways, and how the younger generation is creating its own standards, while others are still navigating their paths. Welcome to Celebrity Rap Life, where the red carpets never roll up and the spotlight never fades. The rewards are legendary, because in celebrity rap life, every downfall can become a comeback, and every headline tells a deeper story. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a second of what's coming next. Let's start with Whitney, because her name carries weight that never fades, no matter how many years pass. When you say Whitney Houston, you're talking about a voice that moved mountains, a presence that commanded every room she walked into, and a legacy that's still teaching people what real talent looks like. But here's where it gets interesting. The way her influence is showing up in today's world isn't through some stuffy tribute concert or a documentary that nobody under 30 is going to watch. No, it's showing up in the streets, in the culture, in the way young artists are approaching their craft with that same raw emotion and authenticity that Whitney brought to everything she touched. People are starting to understand that honoring a legend isn't about copying what they did, it's about capturing that same spirit and making it your own. And when you see that connection being made in real time, when you watch the torch being passed in ways that feel organic and true, that's when you know the legacy is alive and breathing. Now let's talk about Kendrick Lamar's daughter, because this is where things get really wild. Kendrick is one of those artists who guards his privacy like it's Fort Knox. The man gives us masterpieces in music, but keeps his family life locked down tighter than a drum. So when any information surfaces about his kids, the internet goes absolutely crazy trying to piece together every detail. But what's fascinating isn't just the curiosity, it's what it represents. Kendrick built his entire career on being authentic, on telling stories that matter, on protecting what's sacred while still giving the world his art. And now, people are watching to see how the next generation, his own flesh and blood, is going to navigate a world where his father is literally a living legend. Will they follow in his footsteps? Will they carve out their own path completely separate from music? The suspense is real, because in hip-hop, legacy means everything, and watching how it gets carried forward is part of the culture itself. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Enter Lil Uzi Vert, the artist who's never met a boundary they didn't want to push, showing up to dance lessons like they're preparing for something big. Now, if you know anything about Uzi, you know this isn't your typical rapper trajectory. This is someone who's always been about breaking molds, challenging expectations, and doing exactly what they want regardless of what people think they should be doing. Dance lessons might seem random to someone who doesn't understand the vision, but for Uzi, it's all part of a bigger picture. It's about evolution, about adding new dimensions to the artistry, about refusing to be boxed into one category or one skill set. And when you really think about it, that's the most Whitney Houston thing anyone could do. Because she was never just a singer, she was a performer who understood that connecting with people required every tool in the arsenal. The connection between all these threads starts to make sense when you step back and look at the bigger picture. What we're witnessing is a cultural moment where the old guards and the new rebels are finding common ground in the most unexpected ways. Whitney represented excellence and emotional truth in an era when the music industry was very different. Kendrick represents conscious artistry and protecting what matters in an age of oversharing and manufactured personas. Uzi represents fearless self-expression and constant evolution in a time when staying relevant means constantly reinventing yourself. And somehow, all these energies are colliding right now, creating something that feels both nostalgic and completely fresh at the same time. Think about what it means for Uzi to be taking dance lessons seriously. In hip-hop, there's always been this weird relationship with dancing. Back in the day, artists like MC Hammer and Bobby Brown made dancing central to their identity, but somewhere along the way, the culture shifted and standing still became cool. But Uzi doesn't care about those invisible rules. They're out here learning choreography, studying movement, understanding how the body can tell a story just as powerfully as lyrics can. And if you think about Whitney's performances, that's exactly what made them legendary. It wasn't just the voice, though the voice was everything. It was the way she moved, the way she commanded space, the way every gesture felt intentional and loaded with meaning. Uzi is tapping into that same understanding that performance is a full-body experience, and the audience deserves to feel something that goes beyond just hearing music. Meanwhile, the conversation around Kendrick's daughter represents something equally powerful, but in a completely different way. It's about the weight of legacy and the freedom to define yourself on your own terms. Imagine growing up knowing your father is one of the greatest rappers alive, knowing that everything you do will be measured against that standard, knowing that the world is watching and waiting to see if greatness runs in the blood. That's an incredible amount of pressure for anyone, let alone a kid who just wants to figure out who they are. But it's also an incredible opportunity because she has access to wisdom, resources, and understanding that most people will never have. The question isn't whether she'll be great, it's what form that greatness will take, and whether she'll choose to share it with the world or keep it private like her father has kept so much of his life. What makes this whole situation so compelling is how it reflects the current state of celebrity and privacy in the digital age. Whitney came up in an era where stars were untouchable, mysterious, larger than life. Kendrick operates in a time where you can choose your level of exposure, where being selective about what you share is actually a power move. Uzi exists in a space where oversharing is the norm, but somehow still feels enigmatic and unpredictable. Each generation has had to navigate fame differently, and watching how that evolution plays out through these different stories is fascinating. It shows you that there's no one right way to be an artist or a public figure, that the rules are constantly being rewritten, and that authenticity always finds a way to shine through regardless of the era. The dance lessons thing deserves more attention because it's actually a brilliant move when you break it down. Hip-hop has always borrowed from different art forms, whether it's sampling from soul and funk, incorporating jazz elements, or pulling inspiration from visual art and film. But formal dance training? That's taking it to another level. That's saying, I want to be so good at this that I'm willing to start from scratch and learn from the ground up. It's humility and ambition wrapped together, and it's exactly the kind of thing that separates good artists from legendary ones. Whitney trained her voice relentlessly, studied music theory, worked with the best vocal coaches in the world, because she understood that natural talent was just the starting point. The real magic came from discipline and dedication to the craft. Uzi is showing that same mentality, and whether people realize it or not, that's carrying forward the same spirit that made Whitney great.
And then there's the element of surprise that makes all of this even more powerful. Nobody expected to see these particular stories intersecting. Nobody predicted that Uzi would be the one putting in dance work while other rappers are focused solely on their next track. Nobody knew what to expect from Kendrick's family life because he's kept it so private. Nobody could have guessed how Whitney's influence would ripple through the culture in these specific ways decades after her peak. But that's what makes culture so alive and unpredictable. The connections that matter most are often the ones you don't see coming, the moments that make you reconsider what you thought you knew about artists and their journeys. The beauty of all this is that it's still unfolding. We don't know where Uzi's dance training will lead or how it'll show up in future performances. We don't know what path Kendrick's daughter will choose, or whether she'll eventually step into the spotlight. We don't know what new ways Whitney's legacy will influence the next wave of artists. But that uncertainty is what makes it exciting. That's what keeps people engaged, keeps them talking, keeps them watching to see what happens next. And in a world where everything feels predictable and manufactured, that genuine suspense and authentic evolution is worth paying attention to, because it reminds us that real artistry can't be faked or forced. It has to be lived, earned, and constantly refined through dedication and vision. That's the real story here, and it's one that deserves to be told with the respect and attention it commands. This story is far from over, and the truth is still unfolding. I want to hear what you think. Drop your take in the comments. And if you don't want to miss the next twist, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a second of what's coming next.